In this video, we are going to dive deep into authentication with Flutter and Firebase. We are going to connect Firebase to our app using Flutterfire CLI. We are going to cover email, password, login and sign up along with email verification, phone number, Google, Facebook and anonymous sign-in. We are also going to persist state for Android, iOS and web along with error handling. We are also going to efficiently manage state using provider. If you're looking for a specific sign-in method, timestamps are mentioned in the description. You can watch the video from there. Don't forget to watch the next bit of the video to understand the folder structure we have till now. Let's get started. Now let me give you a quick run through of the application we have till now. So this is our my app widget, which is called in the run app function over here. And now we have the home as a login screen. We have the basic default theme data. And these are the routes that we have. We'll understand what these named routes are. But now if you go to the login screen, you can see that in the scaffold we have a column, and this column consists of all the custom buttons that we have: Facebook sign in, anonymous sign in, Google sign in, email password sign up, email password login. So this is the screen that looks when we just integrate it. Now if I go to the login email password screen, we have two text editing controllers and a dispose method so that there's no memory leak. Then we have a column, and in the column we have a text saying login, then a custom text field to enter email, the same for a password, and then a button to say login. Now what are these widgets? If I click over here, you can see that these are custom text fields that are created. In the widgets tab, I've created them so that I can reuse them whenever I want. So this is a text editing controller or the text field. If I go back to the login screen, you can see this is what we have, and the same for the sign up screen, just the text has been altered, and a screen for phone sign in, which is just a text editor saying phone number and send OTP. But nothing happens as of now. We haven't integrated any Firebase functionality. For these three buttons, nothing happens because we'll just have to click on them and then get redirected to the new screen and save data to the Firebase authentication tab. Over here we have a screens folder which consists of the 4 screens that I've told you. Login screen is the main login screen which consists of all the buttons. A login email password screen for the email password login. Then the phone screen as the name suggests, and the sign up email password screen as the name suggests. So this is a services tab or the services folder where we're going to store the Firebase authentication functionalities that we have, like Firebase methods or something like that. We have utils to store all the utility files that we'll have. Suppose a snack bar, which will be used to continuously display an error if there is any. A dialog box in case we want the user to enter a OTP, for example in our phone screen. Then we have the widgets for all the reusable widgets and a main or Dart file. The next thing we want to do is connect our application to Firebase. For this, we are going to use the Flutterfire CLI. So for our Firebase setup, we need to go to this website, console.firebase.google.com, and then click on Add Project. Here we need to give it a name. So let's give it a name of Firebase Flutter Auth. I think that should suffice. And then click on Continue. We will disable Google Analytics for this project and then click on Create Project. And let's wait for our project to be created and loaded up. Alright, our new project is ready. We can click on Continue. After that, we don't need to do any of this setup manually because we're going to do this using Flutterfire CLI. We just need to click on the settings icon and go to the project settings. And here we need to keep track of a project ID. We will need that. So now what we need to do is go to our project again. And here we need to run the command .pub global activate flutterfire CLI. After doing that, it will get us the latest version of Flutterfire CLI. You can see activated Flutterfire CLI. Then we need to run npm install -g, which is globally Firebase tools. With this, it will install Firebase tools for us globally, but I've already run the command, so I don't need to run it again. In case you have any errors, let me know in the comment section. After that, we need to run the Firebase login command. If we run that, you can see already logged in as possession emailer. Now I have a recent or latest version of npm Firebase tools, If you want, if you install it, you will get a newer version yourself. If you want to update, then you can again run this command. I'm not going to do that because I'm pretty sure there's nothing much for us here. After that, you can go to your build.gradle file, and here if you want to change your application ID, you can change it, because later on you'll have to follow these instructions again to get your own Google Services info file if you change the application ID. So if you want, you can change it right now. And if you're using Mac OS and you want to build an iOS app, you can do the same for iOS. So runner, and you can just open it in Xcode and get the application ID, which we are going to do. But if you want to change, you can change it. After that, you need to run the following command: flutterfire config. Flutterfire is a single word, config, and we need to put a backslash after this. After that, we have -- project, which will equal to the project name that we have. So if we go to our project settings here, so we can copy this and put it down here. After that, we again need to put a backslash, and now we need to put in out, which will be equal to like where the output file of Firebase options should lie. So we can just put lib/firebase options.dart. Then we'll again put a backslash. Then we need an iOS bundle, so we'll have iOS bundle ID, and then we need to pass in the bundle ID. To get the bundle ID, you need to take the iOS folder and open it in Xcode. And now if we click on runner, we can get this bundle identifier and close it because we won't need Xcode for some time now. We can paste this, then again put a backslash, then get a Mac OS bundle ID. So that will be Mac OS bundle ID, and Mac OS bundle ID is going to be similar to the iOS bundle ID. So we can paste the same thing, then put a backslash. Then we need an Android app ID. So we'll have Android, -- Android app ID. And to get the app ID, we are going to go to the build.gradle file again, copy this application ID and paste it over here. Then we don't need to put a backslash because our configuration is only this much, so we can click on enter and wait for this. So you can see it found 20 Firebase projects, which is the number of projects I have, and it has selected this project that I've passed in over here. Then which platforms do we need a configuration with? We will select all of them and then click on enter. These are all the projects that we need. We are not going to configure for Mac OS, so you can disable it, but let's just keep it in case in future we have Google sign-in supporting Mac OS, which will be pretty soon in my opinion. So Flutterfire CLI worked for us and it generated a Firebase options.dart file, and it is giving us an error over here, and that's because we don't have the Firebase core package in our application. So what we're going to do is click on Command-Shift-P and use the PubSpec Assist VS Code extension. You can just go over here and get your own extension called PubSpec Assist. And now we just need to enter the package's name that we want to add to our application. So I can put in the name as Firebase Core, and then separated by comma to add Firebase_auth, and click on enter. These are the only two that we need for email, password, sign up and sign in. So let's get them. Alright, now since this has been added to our application, you can see the error in the Firebase options.dart has gone away. Now if we go to our build.gradle, we just need to change this minimum SDK version to 21. This is the lowest I think we can go. I think 19 is the lowest, but let's go with 21. Usually it's 23. Then we can go to the main.dart file and make some configurations here. So we just need to pass in asynchronous function because we need to run await Firebase dot initialize app, and to initialize the app we need to pass in some options. So these are the options. Actually not Firebase options, default Firebase options dot current platform. So these will find the current platform Firebase options. So if we go in the default Firebase options, which is the Firebase options.dart file, you can see that it generates a list of options, and according to our platform, it will give us the options. And now whenever we run this, we need to ensure that the widget's Flutter binding has been initialized. So we'll run this and we are all good to go, I think. So we can again go to our iOS folder and run pod install, so that it installs all the extra extensions that we have. And here you can see we are getting an error because we need to go to the pod file, uncomment this line and change it to 11. You can work with 10 as well, but it will only work if you need app email password sign in or sign up. But for Google phone, you need to change it to 11. Now again we can run pod install, and it has installed all the necessary dependencies for us. We can again go back, select the iPhone simulator from here, click on run and run without debugging. So our application has loaded up and you can see it over here. It's working well. So I presume that the Firebase functionality for iOS has been done. So now we can exit this and get a new Pixel 5 emulator just to test that Android is working as well. I mostly think it will give us an error because we need to go to the pill.gradle file again in our Android app, and here we need to make sure that multidex is enabled and set to true. With this, we should be able to run our application. So let's try to run the app. Alright, our app has loaded up on our Android emulator, and if I click over here, it's working. If I go back and go to the phone sign in, it's working. So now the next thing we want to work on is the email password login and sign up. So let's get started with that. So now for email authentication, what we need to do is go to our console.firebase.google.com again. Then in the authentication tab, we need to get started. After we click this, it will get us to this page, which is the sign in method page. And here we need to enable email or password. After we enable that, we have to enable other providers as well, but we'll do that once we reach there. But for now, we are going to focus on the email or password method. Then we need to go to this our own project again. And here in the services tab, we need to create another file called Firebase Auth methods. Now in a Firebase Auth methods.dart file, we need to import a Firebase Auth.dart package and the material.dart package, and then create a class called Firebase Auth methods. And here we'll first of all create a Firebase Auth instance, and we'll not initialize it to anything because we are going to take this from the constructor. So wherever we use this class, we will make sure that we will pass in the authentication instance. But in our application, we are only going to do that once because we are making use of provider, but just for testing, as long as we don't integrate provider in our application, we're going to pass in the Firebase Auth instance. If you don't understand this right now, when we see it in action, you'll understand. After that, we need to have an email sign up function. So we'll create a sign up with email function, and we do require some arguments, right? So the arguments we require is an email, a password, and build context. The build context will be used to display, suppose, a snack bar, right? So if we use scaffold messenger dot off context, so that context will help us here. In case you're storing data to Firebase Firestore and you want to save that data in provider, then you can make use of provider here, and this context will help then as well. We are using a named function over here, meaning if you call the function something like this, sign up with email, then you need to make sure that you pass in the email and so on. I hope you understand. After that, we need to make this function asynchronous because we are going to contact with the Firebase database. So it will be an asynchronous process. And since it's asynchronous, there are options of, exceptions. So we will put in a try and catch block. In the try block, we need to pass in auth.createUser with email and password. What this will do is basically in our authentication tab, create a user which will be created right now and signed in right now. So as the name suggests, it will create the user with email and password, and then we will pass in the email from this parameter that we have. After that, we'll have a catch block. Now in this catch block, if we do like print e, this will give us an unformatted thing, right? Because it will be an object, and we will display an object if we show it in snack bar. That's not what we want. So we can catch a different type of error called Firebase auth exception. With this becomes a Firebase auth exception type variable e. So with this, we will get access to multiple codes and multiple properties. So we can just do show snack bar, and this show snack bar is a utility function that we told we will create here in this utils file. We will create that in a second, but what this will accept is a context and e.message. So as I told, this will have various properties. So if I just do print e dot, you can see that it will give us a credential, the email number, the phone number, the message, the code. So with this code, you can do different types of error handling. So suppose there is a code of weak password. So what we can do is e.code equal to weak password. So if this code is equal to weak password, for now it will give us a value in true or false, but then we can use if condition and give a custom message. So we can do something like if e.code is equal to weak password, then what do we want to do, right? So suppose we just want to show a snack bar with a different error message. So we can pass in context again, and then we can pass in, suppose you gave a wrong password, instead of, giving the message that is given by Firebase. But we will keep e.message. If you want to do different type of error handling, you can find out the codes. So if you just do e, you print out e, it will give you the error code first and then the message. And that's why we put on Firebase auth exception. Alright. So now in our utils function, we will create a function or a file called showSnackBar.dart file. So now we just need to import material dart and create a function called showSnackBar, which will accept arguments of build context and text. And here we just need to show a scaffold messenger dot of context, and that's why over here we had build context required, because this method or Firebase auth methods class doesn't have build context by itself, because it is not a stateful widget or a stateless widget. Right now in this show snack bar, we need to pass in a snack bar. So for the snack bar, we'll pass in a snack bar, and content will be the text, and this text is from here, the second argument. So with this, we have a show snack bar function ready. We can take this and import it to our file. If you wondered how I did that, you can just press command full stop and you'll get a list of error options or error handling options, so to say. You can add them. Now we have our sign up with email ready. We can take this, go to our sign up email password and pass in over here. But over here, another thing we need to do is create a function called sign up user. So now let's create a sign up user function at the top of our file, so that we don't mix UI with our logic, right? So if we want to replace some part of the UI, we'll have to remove, suppose, this custom button. So this will also remove the on tap function logic that we'll have. But if we put it up here, it won't disturb our application. So now we need to create a sign up user function, which will be an asynchronous function, and we'll use Firebase auth methods. Make sure to import it, and we have it imported here. Then in the parameter, we need to pass in Firebase auth instance. As I said over here, we have Firebase auth instance that we need to accept. So we are accepting it from here, and then we are using the .signup with email function that we created. Now we need to pass in email, and the email will be email controller, which is this text editing controller.text, and this text editing controller is bound to this custom text field. After that, we also need to do the same for password. So this will be password controller.text, and finally we need to pass in the build context. Now this is done. Now we can run our application and see if it is working or not. Alright, so our app has loaded up, and now if we go to our emulator, which is here. We can click on sign up and let's sign up right now. This says password should be at least 6 characters. So that means our sign up function is working and our Firebase auth connection is also there. So now let's pass in test as an email. So this should give us a wrong email as well. And the password can be test123 and click on sign up. You can see email address is badly formatted. So I'll just pass in test@gmail.com. Our error handling is working. And if I click on sign up, it doesn't give us any error messages. So I feel we have done it. I'll click on reload here. And we have a test@gmail.com email created. Now the next thing we need to worry about is the email verification that we need to add. So let's add that. So for email verification, we again have to go to our Firebase auth methods class. And in here, in the sign up with email function, we will add the send email verification and pass in the build context, because even here we need to display an error. So we will require a build context. And now at the bottom of this function or the class, we need to pass in this email verification. So for this email verification, we are not going to return anything the same as this function, because we are doing error displaying here itself. So we don't need to pass in anything over here. And now in the email verification, it will accept a build context and it will be an asynchronous process. Now again, we'll wrap it with a try catch block. And then we need to pass in the send email verification function, which is present in auth.currentUser. So we'll send the email verification and then we will show a snack bar saying that the email verification has been sent. Then we will catch the on Firebase auth exception again and then show a snack bar if there is any error. Alright, so a function has been created. Now we should receive a send email verification. So now if I just restart the application, the restart is actually not needed, but let's do it. And in the email password sign up, I'll pass in the email as positionemailer@gmail.com. I'll pass in the password as test123 and click on sign up. Email verification has been sent. So if I go to my mail position emailer, I get a email verification from this project. And here, if I click on this link, I should be able to see that my email has been verified. So that means that my account has also been created. I mean, it has been created earlier as well. But after we receive the email verification, we'll see that a property on our user called email verified is set to true now. So this position emailer is now verified. So in our application further, we'll be able to restrict access to any user in case they have not verified the email. We'll look at that later, but we have our email verification ready. Now let's look at login process. So for login, again, we need to come into a Firebase auth methods class and we're going to create a function right below sign up with email. So we're going to do email login. So there is our comment. It's good to comment the functions. And here we have login with email function, which is again going to return nothing. It's going to be similar to all other functions that we've created. And we are going to accept email, password, and build context similar to our sign up function. And here it's going to be an asynchronous process. Again, we're going to have a try and catch block. So in the try block, we're going to have authentication dot sign in with email and password. And we're going to await it like our create with user email and password function, because everything is a future here. Then we need to pass in email and a password. So if the current user is not verified, so with this exclamation mark, we are checking if the auth.currentUser, their email verified, which is a property on current user, which will give us a bool value, is verified or not. So if it is not verified, then we need to send in an email verification. We have created that function here. And then we need to make sure that we use provider to restrict some access, or we use navigator to push to another page, which is solely with the purpose of displaying that the email is not verified. So you can use both of these things over here, somewhere over here, so that you can make your application accessible. And after that, we need to catch any error with on Firebase auth exception again and show a snack bar. So we have a login with email function ready. We can go to our login screen, and in here login email password screen, we need to create a function called login user. So at the top of our file again, we need to create a login user function. And in here, we'll have Firebase auth methods and we need to import that. You can find that over here. And then in the parameter, we need to pass in Firebase auth.instance because we accept that over here, Firebase auth. And then we need to log in with email and pass in the email, which will be the email controller.text. This controller is bound to our text editing controller over here. And you can find the same for password controller. And then we need to pass in the password and a context. So with this, our function is ready. And now if I restart the application and click on login, let's try to log in with position emailer. So we'll have position emailer@gmail.com. We'll pass in the password as test123 and click on login. I think we are successfully reached there. So yep, we have reached there, but there is no way to know that we have signed in. But in case, if I go to our sign up screen and I pass in the password as testing123 and click on sign up, you can see email verification has been sent. And now in the email password login, I'll pass in a@gmail.com again. The password, just to check if you're getting the right messages, I'll pass in test123 instead of testing123. The password is invalid or the user does not have a password. That's correct. I'll pass in the password as testing123 and click on login. Again, the email verification has been sent. Now let's try to run our application on web as well. So here I'm going to run the command flutter run -d, which stands for device, Chrome, and we're going to pass in the web host name localhost and a port of 5000 because that's what is registered in the Google developers credentials or account. That's where it is stored. Like with 5000, you can go there and change it to localhost 3000 or something like that. But if we do this, we are going to run it on a specific port always, and this will help us in our future sign-in methods as well. Now, if I click on enter, it will get my app running in Chrome, and let's wait for it and test our application. Alright, so our application has loaded up, and if I go to the web, it's not looking very good, I know, but let's not go there. And now in the sign up, we have to create a new email, and you can see that the named route is also working well. And we have to pass in an email. So let's pass in b@gmail.com and pass in the password as test123. I'll click on sign up. Email verification has been sent, and that means our web is working as well. If I reload, you can see b@gmail.com. Awesome. Now we can close this, and now let's get started with phone verification. So again, in our Firebase auth methods, we're going to create a function for phone sign-in. Now let me tell you the procedure for our phone sign-in. Basically, when we are on this screen, we'll click on this button. We'll enter our phone number. So suppose I pass in my phone number as 12345678910 or something like that, and then click on send OTP. A dialog box should appear, something like this. And then it should tell us to enter the OTP that we received. And then after we receive the OTP, we have to fill that in and click on done. And then it will verify that OTP for us and sign in if it's correct and give us a error message if we are wrong. Alright. So now here we need to create a phone sign in function. Again, it will not return anything and it will be an asynchronous function. We'll receive build context and a phone number. Then this function that we're going to have works only for Android and iOS. So we will have auth.verify phone number. This is the function that works only for Android and iOS. For web, we are going to make some configuration and make it work there as well. Don't worry. But for now, let's focus on Android and iOS. So we have the verify phone number, and here we need to pass in the phone number that we are receiving from the argument here. Then we will get a function which is the verification completed. So if the user passes the phone number and completes the verification, then what do we need to do? Then we basically get the credential, which is the phone auth credential, and we sign in with that credential. Now we have another function called verification failed. What if the verification fails? Exactly what you thought. We're going to use snack bar and we'll display the error message that we get. Now here we don't have any option of using on auth failed or on auth firebase exception, because here if we hover over this, you can see it is of the type firebase auth exception. So it already gives us e.message that we need. Now after this we will have code sent. Now the difference between code sent and verification completed is that this verification completed function works only on Android. So with this, basically what we are doing is checking in our phone if we have received any OTP. If we have received that OTP, then we're going to sign up with that OTP and not ask user to fill in that OTP. So it will be automatic. And in this code send function, we are going to receive the OTP, but we will not verify using that verification code. The user has to enter their own verification code. And this verification completed only works on Android. It doesn't work on iOS at all. So this code sent is the function that will be helpful to us in our iOS, but it will also work in Android, but it is majorly helping us in iOS. Now in this code send function, make sure to make it as an asynchronous function, and here we need to display an OTP dialog box. Again, I told you that we are going to have an OTP dialog box in our utils function. So let's create a file there called showotpdialog.dart file. So now the first thing we need to do is import the material package, and then we need to create a function showOTPDialog and accept some arguments, which are the build context, then the text editing controller that we'll call a code controller. Now if you don't understand why we are using a text editing controller, basically we are going to show an OTP dialog box, and in that dialog box we are going to ask the user to enter the OTP that they received. So that's why this text editing controller is going to help us. And then we're going to have an on pressed. So we're also going to have an OK button down. So whenever the user presses that, what do we need to do? That is determined from here as well. So we are going to receive that from constructor as well. Now we are going to receive the show dialog box, and we have that in Flutter. So this is the show dialog box. This is not any custom widget. Then we need to pass in a context over here, and another required field is the builder. So let's add a builder, but before that we need to add barrier dismissible and set it to false. Basically the user cannot dismiss this dialog box. Initially it is set to 0. So if the user touches outside of this dialog box, the barrier will get dismissed. But if the user sets it to false, then the barrier won't get dismissed and it will stay there only. Then we need to pass in a builder, and the builder will display an alert dialog box. This alert dialog box will have a title of entering an OTP, which is basically a task. And then the content will be a column, which will be a text field. And in the text field, we are going to pass in the code controller, which is this controller that we are receiving from the constructor. This is just the UI part, so don't worry about it. Then we are going to have an actions property, and in that actions property, we are going to pass in a text button. This text button will have a child of done. So basically when the user enters this OTP in the text field, he or she can click on that text button, and the onPressed will do exactly what is asked in the Firebase auth methods class when we use that show OTP dialog box. So now we can save this, go over here, import show OTP dialog box. So let's import that, and we need to pass in a code controller. So this code controller, and now we need to create a code controller. Now this code controller is a text editing controller. So we can create that at the top of the function. We are not creating it over here. You'll understand that in a while, because we are going to use the code controller in code sent again to verify that we have done the correct thing. Then we need to pass in a context, an onPressed function, and now in the onPressed function, so whenever the user clicks on OK, what do we need to do? We were going to create a phone auth provider.credential, and this is going to require a verification ID. This verification ID is the one we are receiving from the parameter. the one that Firebase itself sends, and an SMS code. And that's why we've put the code controller at the top of our function. This code controller is going to help us verify if this verification ID that Firebase sends automatically and the SMS code that the user inputs is equal or not. Then we get that credential, and using that credential we can sign in the user. So we will have auth.signin with credential, and then we'll pass in this phone auth credential. And then we can just pop off because we have that OTP dialog box showing. So if the user clicks on done, then we will transition to the next screen, but then the OTP dialogs will still remain there. So we need to pop this off before we go to the next screen. Then we have another function called code auto retrieval timeout. I didn't particularly find a use case for this, so I've left it at nothing. You can also return null if you want, it won't be an issue. And we have still not imported the library, so let's import show OTP dialog box, and here we have it. So our phone where sign in should take place in our Android and iOS. So let's copy this and go to our phone screen. In the phone screen, in the on tab, we need to replace the empty function with the phone sign in function, and at the top of the file we'll create the phone sign in function. And here we'll pass in Firebase auth methods and pass in the Firebase auth.instance in the parameter and do .phone sign in. And we need to pass in a build context, that is what it requires. If you hover over this, you can see. And then we need to pass in the phone controller.text, which is the phone that the user inputs. Alright, now if we save this much and run our application, we should see our app moving forward. Alright, so our app has loaded up, and now if I go over here, pass in the phone number and click on send OTP, you can see that we received an error over here, and that's because we need to do some configurations. In our Firebase Authentication tab, we need to go here, and over here in our Android app, first of all, we need to pass in a fingerprint. So we will have an SHA for certificate fingerprint, and to get a SHA fingerprint, we need to run the following command on Mac. I'll mention the resource in the description below. Do check it out. And I'll click on enter. I'll receive an SHA fingerprint. I can copy that and paste it over here and click on save. Now we can just install this Google services.json file. And also in our authentication tab, in the sign in method, we need to add a new provider called phone. We need to enable this. And phone numbers for testing, you can pass in anything you want in case you don't want your phone number to be leaked out or something, just for testing. But I'm not going to do that. And for Apple, Android and web, you can follow additional steps, but there's no need for it actually. And click on save and take Google services.json file and put it in Android app. So I'll just take this and paste it over here. I'll rename this file to Google services.json file, not Google services 2. Make sure to make that change. And now I can again run the app. Now this shouldn't affect our iOS app at all. It should only affect our Android app because we had to do some configurations in our Android folder. For iOS, I think adding this using sign-in method was a problem, but we fixed that. Let's wait for our app to launch and see if it's working or not. Alright, so our iPhone has loaded up, and if we go over here and let me exit the Finder, we need to click on phone sign in, enter the phone number. I'll enter again. I'll click on send OTP, and again we are getting an error. Please register custom URL scheme. So for iOS also, I think we need to get our info.plist file. So here in our project settings, click on project settings again and scroll down to find Apple Apps iOS and install Google Service info.plist file. Now we can click on this iOS folder and open in Xcode. We can again click on Finder, Downloads, get our Google Service info.plist file. I'll actually move this to my desktop and here I'm going to rename this to Google Services info.pls file and pass in the runner and runner. Then make sure to tick this and this and this and click on finish. Then we can exit the Xcode, and hopefully this time again our app doesn't crash and runs. So run without debugging and let's see. Alright, so our app has launched up and hopefully this time again it should work. Not sure now. And I've clicked on send OTP and it's still not working. So now the other option we can try is go to our iOS folder, again open it in Xcode. And now over here we can go to our Google Services info.pls file, get the reversed client ID, which is this one, and copy this. Go to our Xcode, and over here in our runner we can go to the URL type, click on plus, and add to the URL schemes this URL and just save this much. Now automatically in our info.pls file we'll get this value. So if we go to our info.pls, we should see the CF bundle URL type and we have our URL type ready over here. So now I can restart the application. Hopefully this time it works. This is the third time that we are trying. So hopefully this time it works. So I have the application ready. Clicking on phone sign in, I'll enter the phone number and click on send OTP. And this time we are redirected to a new page. It's verifying that we are not a robot. Hopefully I passed the QR test and it hasn't sent any. We need to pass in the OTP. And I've received the OTP on my phone number, so I'll pass in 721 and click on done. So I think we're logged in. So if I go to our Firebase console and my phone number is there, and the provider type is also there, that means it has worked. Now let's try it from Android and then we can work on the web version. Alright, so our app has loaded up on our Android emulator or my Android physical device in this case. I'm going to click on phone sign in, enter my phone number, and click on send OTP. I'm redirected to another page just to ensure that I'm not a robot again. I have to enter an OTP. I've received the OTP, so I'll pass in 430184 and click on done. And what I had done is remove the phone number from our authentication tab. If I refresh, we should see that the phone provider is again there. So that means it's working well on Android and iOS. Now let's configure it for the web, because in our Firebase auth methods, if we go, this verify phone number method works only on Android iOS. We have a different method altogether for web. So it should be fairly easy for us to do it. So let's do it. Alright, so for the web version, what we need to do is again go to the phone sign in, obviously. And then over here, we need to check if we are in the web version. So we can check that using the K as web. Then we need to use auth.signin with phone number. Now this function only works on the web. So if it is the web version, then we are going to use auth.signin with phone number, and it will return to us a confirmation result using which we can get SMS verification code and stuff like that. So to sign in with the phone number, we need to pass in the phone number. That's all that we require. Now over here, we again need to display the same OTP dialog box that we showed over here. This part. So we are just copying this and pasting it over here. It's the same thing. We have our phone auth credential. We need to pass in the verification ID and the SMS code, and then we need to sign in with the credential that we pass in. And then we need to pass in the else block over here. So we have if K is web, If it's not web, then we want this to happen and put an ending brace over here. That's all we want. Now we need to import foundation.dart so that we can get k is web. To make it more secure, what you can do is show k is web so that you can only access k is web from here. And now we can run our application on the specific port that we had decided earlier, which is 5000, and it is the default port that is there in Firebase. You can check that and click on enter. So our web version has loaded up. I'll just maximize it and click on phone sign in, enter my phone number and click on send OTP. We are again seeing a dialog box and I've received a verification code. So we'll put that verification code in and click on done. And we're not getting any messages, but we have a phone number already registered. So I'm assuming that we have successfully done our verification job. So it works on web now as well. Now the next thing we need to work on is the Google sign-in. So let's quickly do that. So for Google sign-in, we are going to use this package because Firebase authentication package doesn't allow us to do Google sign-in like email password sign-in. We have to use an external package, but don't worry, it will always stay updated because it's maintained by Flutter itself. So you can see that it was published 12 hours ago. So it's the latest version. So let's take this and add it to our PubSpec assist. So I'm going to press Command Shift P and use the PubSpec assist in my VS Code extensions. After this has been added, I need to go to my Firebase console and here in the sign-in method, add a new provider, which is Google. I'll click on enable and add a project support email of whatever it provides me with. It's the email account that I have. Then after that, we don't need to do anything for this unless you really want to do it. It's not a big deal. Then we can click on save. Then this will be enabled. In the meantime, we can go over here and see how we can integrate iOS in our application. Now over here you can see that there is iOS integration. So first of all, this plugin requires iOS 9 higher. If you don't understand what this means, basically if you go to your pod file, you need to make sure that this line has a version of 9.0 or above. We have put in 11.0 because Facebook sign-in needs 11.0 minimum. So this condition has been satisfied. After that, we need to register the application. We have done that. Second step has been done because if you go over here, we have passed in the Google service info.plist file in the runner iOS/runner, and we have that. After all of this, we need to add these lines in our info.plist file. We have done that, but just to show you, we have done that in our phone authentication part. Basically, what you need to do is copy this line, this chunk actually, and put it over here. You can see we have added that, and instead of putting in this line, you need to pass in a reverse client ID. To get a reverse client ID, you can go to your Google services info.plist file and here copy the reverse client ID and paste it over here. Make sure that both of them match and you are good to go then. So now what I'm going to do is run the application, and in the meantime, while the application is loading, I can make sure to configure for Android. Now for Android, what we need to do is we can scroll up and you can see to access Google sign-in, you'll need to make sure to register your application. And then we need to pass in a Google services.json file. We have done that as well in the previous chapter. In case you're wondering what to do for Google sign-in, well, go in the project settings. Then you need to scroll down. And here in the Android apps, you need to pass in your SHA fingerprint. To get the SHA1 key, what you need to do is run a command in your terminal, which is something like this. I'll mention this in the description and I'll mention the resource. If you have any errors, you can check that out and it will help you out. So you have to run this. After you run this, I'll click on enter actually. you'll get your SHA1 and SHA256 key. Copy your SHA1 key and go over here and add the fingerprint over here. After that, click on save and then install Google services.json file and put it in Android/app. And you see my Google services.json file ready over here. Now our iOS app has been stopped, and now this is because we need to go to our iOS folder, and I'll clear this off. In the iOS folder, we need to run this command pod install. In case Google sign-in doesn't show up here, what you need to do is run the command flutter clean. Then what you want to run is flutter pub get. It will actually show you some errors. I'm not sure why isn't it showing over here, but you should get error showing up here for syntax errors. After you run flutter pub get command, you need to run pod install again. And now over here you can see Google sign-in showing up. So that means we have had a success. We can go back and now run the iOS simulator. Now this should run. So let's wait for our app to launch. Alright, so our app has loaded up. So I'm assuming that it's working on iOS. You can see that. So now let's create a function for Google sign-in, and then to test it, we will do that testing on Android and iOS. And then we need to do some configurations for web, after which we can do and run it on web as well. So now for Google sign-in, we will create a new method in our Firebase auth methods class. And in here, we'll have Google sign-in, which will be of the return type future void, just like every other function that we've created. It will accept a build context, and it will be an asynchronous process because we're going to contact with Firebase authentication. Now we'll obviously have a try and catch block because we are having an asynchronous process done. We'll catch any exceptions that we get. And in the try block, first of all, we're going to use Google signin.signin. After that, we're going to take that Google user that we get and save it in the Google sign-in authentication variable. After that, we will check if the Google auth.access token. So whatever Google auth gives us, which will be an access token and an ID token, if they are not null, then we need to create a new credential. To create a new credential, we'll have Google auth provider.credential and we'll pass in the access token. So if the access token is not null, then it will be Google auth.access token and the ID token will be Google auth.id token. Then we will do auth.signin with credential, just like we do for any other function. Instead of doing sign in with email and password, we are doing it with credential. As we saw in phone sign in, if you've seen that chapter, we can see that we passed in the credential, which is the phone auth credential, and over here we have OAuth credential. And we stored that in the user credential variable. With this user credential variable, we are able to get user ID or user details if we want. So with this, we are able to store users in Google Authentication tab, or I mean Firebase Authentication tab. But in case you want to go a bit beyond this, because there is only one Google sign-in with Firebase Authentication, what I mean is you can't do Google sign up and Google sign in two different ways. You have to use only one method for both of them. So in case you want to do Google sign up and check if the user is newly created, what you can do is first of all check if user credential.user is not null. So if the user that we created right now is not null and everything went well, then we want to check if the user credential.additional user info, if it's a new user or not. So if the user credential.additional user info, if the user is a new user, then what you can do is basically do any other task that you want to do along when the user signs up. So if you want to store data in Firestore database, you can do that inside of this if function. If you want to maybe store some data in provider, you can do that in this if block. You can basically do sign up processes in this tab, and you can put an else tab and do login processes in that. Both of them should work, and this is how you're going to do Google sign-in. Now we might get an error over here, and we are getting Google sign-in account error, syntax error. For that, I'm going to press command and full stop, and we're going to import Google sign-in library. Now we don't have any errors. Now let's bind the sign-in with Google function with our Google sign-in button. So what we're going to do is go to our login screen, which is the main login screen. So for Google sign-in, what we're going to do is in the OnTap function, we're going to use Firebase auth methods and make sure to import it. You can see I've imported it right here. And then we need to pass in Firebase auth.instance because that's what it wants. And then we'll use sign in with Google function, and that's all we have. Then we can restart our application and see if it's working or not. So over here, I'm going to press on Google sign in. We can click on continue. I'm going to select this email and hopefully I'm logged in. We are not getting any errors. So if I go to my authentication tab, earlier we had no users. Now we have position emailer @gmail.com with Google provider. That means it has worked. Our Google sign is working on iOS. Now let's get it working on Android. So I'm going to fire up my Pixel emulator and run it. Alright, so our application has loaded up, and here I'm going to click on Google sign in. And here I'm signing in the user. I had to log in my Pixel emulator, and I clicked on I agree. Now let's see what happens when we do that. We need to accept all the terms and agreements. And as you can see, we're not getting any errors. And we actually had position emailer already here, so there's no way of knowing if it worked or not. But I'm going to assume that it worked because we're not getting any errors or anything at all. So I think it's working. So now let's work on the web version. So right now, if you try to load up the web version and try to run it, you'll see that the web version wouldn't show up because we have not configured anything for the web. To configure for the web, you can go to the Google sign-in package again. And if you scroll down, you can see that the web integration part has a separate package for it. We don't have to install it because it's already present in the Google sign-in package. But what it says here is a thing to go through. For the web integration, we need to add the following line in our index.html file. So we can copy this and go to the index.html file. And over here, we can paste in the line that was given to us. And after this, we need a Google sign-in OAuth client ID. To get that, it might be different for web, Android and iOS. But to get that for your application, what you need to do is go to Google Cloud Platform, console.googlecloud.google.com. I'll mention the link in the description below. Go over here and select your project from here. Mine is not Firebase Auth demo. This is the demo project that I wanted. So click on all, and here you'll have Flutter Firebase Auth tutorial or any other project name you've mentioned. Click on it. We can click on this menu icon, and after that we can go to the APIs and services and click on credentials. After going here, you can see that the web client has auto created by Google services. So you basically need to copy this Google client ID that is present. You can copy that and paste it over here. That is the client ID that we want. So we'll actually just remove the entire content and paste it with our own. Alright. Now, the reason you don't want to pick this or this client ID is because this client ID is different from this and this. They're all auto created by Google services when we registered to Firebase. So all of them are very different. After this, you can run the application on a specific port, and that specific port I told you was 5000 in previous chapter. So you can just run Flutter run Chrome with the web host name of localhost and a web port of 5000 because that's what is default in Firebase. If you run it from any other port, it will not work well for you in the debugging version. So just run it on 5000, that is the default one, and then click on enter. Alright, so our application on Chrome has loaded up, and you can see that it's on port 5000. Now if I click on Google sign in here, I get to a new authentication, and I'm already logged in to the email account I previously used to log in. So now if I go to my authentication tab where I've removed the user previously, I can again reload, and I'm not getting any user. Now this is because the following thing that we did over here only works for Android and iOS. It doesn't work well for web. So for web, we need to do something a bit different. So what we're going to do is introduce an if check. So we are going to check if the operating system or the platform that we are on is web. Else, we're going to put an else block here. So if we are on operating system, we need to do some stuff. Else, what we're going to do is all of this stuff. So if it's not web, it's going to be Android or iOS. So all of this stuff is going to happen on Android or iOS. If it's on web, then we need to do things a bit differently. If it's on web, then we need to initialize Google Auth provider and save it to Google provider. Then we need to add a scope so that we can only read the contacts. We need to add one scope. You can select any scope from the resource I'll mention in the description. You can check out the scopes you can add. You can select any one and add it to the Google provider. After that, you need to make sure to run auth.signin with popup and pass in the Google provider to it. If you don't add a scope, it will give you an error as of this version. So make sure to add a scope, whatever you want. If you want, you can just add this scope as well. And then we need to sign in with popup. Now, if I save this and restart the application, I can go in here and click on Google sign in. It's now asking me to sign in. I can select the email that I want to sign in with. And it says that Google hasn't verified this app. This will happen on HTTP websites. It won't happen on HTTPS website when you host it on NetLifey, Google Pages, or GitHub Pages or Heroku or any other hosting website. But for HTTP debugging, this will happen. So what you can do is click on advanced and then go to flutterfirebase.com. Then it will ask you if you want to give this access, which is the scope that we entered. We can click on continue. It doesn't matter. And I think we are all signed in. If I reload, position emailer @gmail.com shows up, and here we are not getting any error. So our sign in with Google function has been completed. The next thing we need to work on is the Facebook sign in. So for Facebook authentication, we have to use this plugin, Flutter Facebook Authentication. This is not organized by Flutter or anything. It's organized by medo.app, but I think they are very active as well because it was published last 25 hours ago. So I'm trusting this, and this is also recommended on Flutterfire website. So I think it's a good to go thing. Now for Facebook authentication, first of all, we'll go to the Firebase console, enable the sign-in method. So let's add a new sign-in provider. We'll enable this, and then we need to pass in an app ID and an app secret. Now for this, we need to go to the developers.facebook.com website, and here we need to log in. So here I'll click on my apps, and I've already logged in, so I don't need to worry about logging in, but you should log in. It's not necessary to log in from the Firebase console email. You can log in with any other email if you want, but I'm going to go ahead with my email. After that, we need to click on create app and create a new app. So you can write whatever your app type is. Mine is none. So I'm going to click on none and then click on next. After that, we need to provide a display name. Display name is going to be Firebase Flutter Tutorial. And this display name is going to be needed later on, I think. So let's keep track of it. And I've passed in all the details. I'm not going to select anything else. And then click on create app. And then I need to pass in my password. And then I'm logged into this project, Firebase Flutter Tutorial. After that, I need to click on add a product. And to add a product, we need Facebook login. So let's set it up. I'll click on setup. Now the first thing we are going to look at is iOS setup. So let's click on iOS. It's going to be fairly easy for iOS. Android is going to be a bit tough. So here we need to set up the environment, development environment. I don't think we are going to use any. So let's click on next. Then we need to pass in a bundle ID. To get the bundle ID, we know it. We can go to the iOS folder, right click and open it in Xcode. After it is open in Xcode, we need to click on runner. In the general part, we can copy this bundle identifier and paste it. And then click on save. After which we get the continue button. We can click over there. Then we need to enable sign on. We can click on that and click on save and again next. After that, we need to configure the info.plist file. So what we need to do is copy all of this. But the thing is, we've already used Google sign in our application. So here we need to do something like this. You need to copy this line, only this line. All of this is not required anymore. You just need to copy this line and then go to your info.plist file. And here in the array part of CF bundle type role, CF bundle URL types, you need to pass in this. And then you need to pass in your app ID as well. To get the app ID, what you need to do is copy this and you'll get your app ID. So you can, instead of putting in FB app ID, you can just put FB and the app ID that you copied. Alright. Now, in case you don't have Google sign in your application, it's going to be very easy for you. You can just copy all of this and paste it in your application and fill in the correct details. After that, we don't need to do any of this stuff. So we can just click on next. We can again click on next, again next. None of this is required. So we can click on next and well, we are completed. So we can go back and now we need to install this Flutter Facebook authentication in our iOS file, or I mean in our project. So we can click on Command Shift P and add it to our PubSpec assist. Now one important thing to note is that your pod file should have a platform iOS version of 11.0. I have repeated this throughout the application if you watch this to the end. So we have used 11.0 and this is needed for Facebook authentication. So make sure to add 11.0. Now we can try to run our application on iOS version. So we can click over there and run without debugging. If the application starts, then it means that our Facebook sign-in has configured properly. So then we can do the configurations for Android as well. So let's wait for it. Alright, so our iOS application has launched and we can actually close Xcode. It's not needed. And I think it's working. So now let's configure it for Android. What I'm going to do is start my Pixelfy emulator in the background. And now let's configure for Android. So for Android, again, we need to go over here. And now you can see that we need to download the Facebook SDK for Android. We don't need to do that. So we can click on next. And then we need to import Facebook SDK. We don't need to do that. We can click on next. And here it asks us to add the package name. Now for the package name, you can go to your Android manifest.xml file, copy the package name from here and paste it over here. Now it asks for default activity class name. So we're going to pass the same package name with an extension of .main activity. And then we can click on save and then continue. After this, we need to generate a development key hash. So if you're on macOS, you need to copy this code. If you're in Windows, then this. So I'm going to copy macOS and then I'm going to put it in my terminal here. So I'll put it here and click on enter. Then we need to enter a key store password. So I'm going to pass in test123 and click on enter. I'm going to change it anyways afterwards. So don't copy this and just ruin it. Alright. Then we're going to copy the key hash and paste it over here. Then we can click on save. Then click on continue. We can enable sign on and click on save. Again, we'll click on next and we need to follow this. So in our app res value strings.xml file, we need to add the following thing. So what you need to do is press Command P if you're on VS Code and type in app res values, go to styles.xml and in this values folder, not in the styles.xml, but in this values folder, which lies in the res folder, where we are asked to create a new file called strings.xml. Here we need to pass in something. Now what do we need to pass in? A Facebook app ID, a login protocol scheme and a client token. So what we need to do here is add the following thing. Well, this line, XML line that you can see, then we need to pass in a resources tag And after that, we need to pass in a Facebook app ID and a Facebook client token. So now to get the app ID, it's mentioned right here. So you can copy that and paste it over here. And to get a client token, what you can do is go to settings, right click on advanced, and you can open it a new tab, so that your page over here stays there. And now over here, you will get your client token. If you scroll down in the security part, you can copy this client token. I will reset this after this project, so make sure to not copy this. And then add your client token here. Then you're good to go for the strings.xml file, so you can close them. Now in the Android manifest XML, we need to do something. So we can go back on our Facebook developer account. So you need to copy both of these tags and put it in Android XML file. So let's go to the Android XML file again. And within application tag, we need to pass in before the activity part. I mean, you can put it anywhere, it won't matter, but it's good over here. And let's just format it a bit. Now we just need to save this. Then let's look ahead what we need. We need to add all of this code as well. So you can copy this and paste it here again. So I'm going to paste it here, and let's format the document again. Yep, this looks good. Then after this, we need to add an internet permission line. So you can add that as well. We need to add that here. So this is all we need. We can now click on next, 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 next. And we are done with our Android part as well. One last thing you need to do in Android manifest.xml file, you need to add the following line. This line is only needed by applications or devices which have Android API version of 30 plus. This is because you cannot call Facebook native apps unless the package visibility needs are declared. So that's why we need this line. After this, let's try and run our application on Android as well. So let's run without debugging, and hopefully this works. So let's wait for our app to launch and see if it's working. Alright, so now we're getting an error here, and so this is what we need, FB login protocol scheme. And the scheme for it is going to be something like you need to put FB, and after that you need to pass in your app ID. So after FB, you need to pass in your app ID, which you can copy it from here. And let's add something else as a safety precaution as well, which is the app name. So you need to pass in Firebase Auth tutorial. I think that's what I mentioned. Flutter Firebase tutorial, something like that. If you want to verify what it is, you can go to this. In the basic settings, you can find display name, which is Firebase Flutter tutorial. I just wrote it upside down, So that is the app name. After that is done, let's try to run our application. Hopefully this time it works. Alright, so our app has loaded and I think it's working now. Our Facebook has been completed. So you can see that we added a Facebook app ID and the app name. Make sure to add that as well. Now we need to go to our Firebase Flutter authentication and need to pass in an app ID and an app secret. To get the app ID, you can just copy it from here and paste it over here. Then we need an app secret. To get an app secret, you need to go to the Facebook developer website again and copy this app secret. Click on show and then copy your app secret. I'll reset it. Again, don't try to copy it. And then we need to go to this Flutter Firebase authentication and pass in the app secret. And then click on save. Alright, so we have added Facebook as a provider as well. So now let's try to write the code for Firebase. For Facebook, it should be fairly easy. So for Facebook sign in, what we need to do is first of all create a future void, sign in with Facebook, accept a build context to show the errors, and then we need to create an asynchronous function. After that, we need to wrap it with a try catch block. Here we are just displaying the error. And in this try block, we need to pass in Facebook auth.instance.login. We need to log in our application. and save the result in the login result. After that, we need to save all of this in a credential, which is the OAuth credential, and we need to make this credential, so which will be done using Facebook OAuth provider.credential. And if you hover over this, you can see that we need to pass in an access token. To get the access token, we need to pass in login result, which is this variable .access token. After that, we need to sign in with this credential, which is this OAuth credential, and we need to pass in this parameter. After this is done, we can import Facebook authentication, Flutter Facebook authentication. You can see that here. And this is all that we need for sign in with Facebook. Now let's bind this function to our main login screen. So what we can do is copy this, paste it down here, and instead of sign in with Facebook, we can write Facebook sign in with Facebook. Now if I restart the application just to see if it's working or not, I can go back here and click on Facebook sign in. It's taking me to Chrome. And here I am on the Facebook website. I'll log in and let you know if it was possible or not. So here it's asking me to continue as Rivaan. So I'm going to continue it with Rivaan. And here you can see we're not particularly getting any error. So if I go to this Firebase authentication tab and click on reload, here we have namanrivaan@gmail.com with Facebook provider. So I think we've done it. Now let's try to run the same on our iOS app. So here I'm going to change the device to iPhone 13 and click on run without debugging. Another thing you would want to do to test your application is in the identifier, delete this account if you're using the same account. And now let's wait for our application to start and see if it's working or not. Alright, so our app has loaded up, and here if I click on Facebook sign in, our app crashes. So the reason this crash happened is we neglected the part to add app IDs, display name, all of that. We do need to add them. So what I'm going to do is go to the info.plist file, and in here we're going to pass in the required things here, which is these lines. So we need to add a Facebook app ID. To get the Facebook app ID, you can just copy this part because this was the scheme that we followed. So you can just pass in there. Then we need a client token. To get the client token, we can just copy the client token from strings.xml file and paste it over here. Then for the display name, again we can go to strings.xml file and copy this display name that we copied from Facebook website. We can paste that over here and we are done. So now let's run our application, and this time it should work. Let's run without debugging. Alright, so our app has loaded up again, and if we go here, we can click on Facebook sign in and it will take us to the browser again. I'll continue with Facebook. We're not getting any errors. So if I go to my authentication tab and reload, it pops up. So our Facebook sign in is working on iOS as well. Now let's try to run the same on web. So I'm going to run that particular command, which is on web port 5000, and click on enter. And now the web version has loaded up. If I run the button, if I click on any button, you will see that we get an error and we're not doing anything. You can see the error. Now this error is mainly because we haven't configured Facebook authentication, which we need to do in the main.dart file. So what we need to do is, before initializing Firebase, I mean you can do it afterwards as well, but I would insist on doing it before initializing the Firebase. You can check if we are on web version. If we are on the web version, then we need to run the following line, and we need to pass in an import library of Facebook auth as well. So what you need to do is Facebook auth.web initialize and pass in the app ID. To get the app ID, you can go to strings.xml file and copy the app ID from here, paste it here. You can also use env struct files or anything just to hide the app ID somewhere, but I'm not going to do that. After that is done, you can remove one brace that was extra, and after that you can run the application again. Our app has loaded up, and now if I click on Facebook sign in, we are taken to this page, and you can see that insecure login block. You can't get an access token or log into this page from an insecure page. So if you do it, it won't matter because we are on HTTP website. But once you use a deployed website and do it on HTTPS, it will work. So don't worry. I'm not going to show you the testing version, but if you deploy it, it will definitely work. If you have any errors, let me know in the comment section. So Facebook sign in for our app is done. Now the next thing we need to work on is anonymous sign in, and then we can look at state management. So let's get started with that. So for anonymous sign in, the first thing we need to do is go to the authentication tab. In the sign in method, add a new provider called anonymous sign in, enable it and click on save. After that, in our Firebase auth methods, we can create a new function for anonymous sign in, which will be called sign in anonymously and an asynchronous process. We'll wrap it with a try catch block, and we're going to catch a Firebase auth exception. And it's going to be simply just a single line called auth.signin anonymously. And with this, the user will be able to sign in anonymously. So this is our sign in anonymously function. We can just take this function, go to our login screen, and in here we can copy this and put this for anonymous sign in as well. And here we'll pass in sign in anonymously. So now if I click on anonymous sign in, we should go to the users and see anonymous user has been signed in. So we have done our job for anonymous sign in. Now let's configure the state management in our application. Alright, so for state management, we are going to use a package named as provider. You might know about it, Flutter recommended state management tool. So let's add that, and we don't need to do any configurations for it. It's based on pure Flutter code. Alright, so after that is done, what we need to do is wrap our material app with a widget known as multi-provider. With this multi-provider widget, we get access to a list of providers which we can use in our application, and it should be at the top of our widget tree. And in case if you have a very big application, having it above the widget tree is a very good thing. I'm not going to go in much detail about it, but we are going to have it at the top of our app. And with there, we are going to initialize two providers. First provider is of the type Firebase auth methods, which is this file. And we're going to create that with the Firebase auth methods, and we're going to pass in Firebase auth.instance, which is what we are accepting from the constructor. The other provider that we're going to have is the stream provider, which will help us when I'll tell you about it later, when we use stream provider actually. And here we need to pass in create, and make sure to pass in the context as the parameter when we do context.read, which is short for provider.of_context listen false. So it just reads and doesn't do anything else. And for this stream provider, one required field is initial data, and we're going to set initial data to null because we don't want anything at first. After this is done, we can just import provider, and all of our not all, but some of our errors are gone. Now let's import Firebase auth methods file and Firebase auth package. And here we are still getting an error, which is this part. So here what we're doing is basically creating a stream provider, which is based on context.read Firebase auth methods.auth state. Now to create that auth state getter, we need to go to this Firebase auth methods, and in here we need to manage state. So for state persistence, we're going to have auth state, which is a function or a getter that is created by Firebase auth itself. What do I mean by this? This is the getter that we are going to have. It's going to return a stream of user, which will tell us if the user is present or not, and it will give us some details about the user, basically the authenticated user. Alright, so we have a getter created, and in here we're going to have Firebase auth.instance. We can actually replace this with _auth.auth state changes, but if you put in Firebase auth.instance, it wouldn't matter. And basically we're going to listen whenever the auth state changes. So these are the functions which when triggered will call auth state changes. There are multiple more functions for this. By multiple, I mean 2. So we have Firebase auth.instance.user changes. This occurs when the following happens. And the other function that we have is ID token changes, and this happens when the following triggers take place. You can use any of these 3 depending upon your use case, but I'm going to go ahead with auth state changes because that's what I want. Alright, so now we have our stream provider also created. Now the next thing we want to create is whenever we land on our application, the home route is the login screen. We don't want that. We either want to go to the home screen, which we haven't created yet, but we will create. So either we want to go to the home screen, else we want to go to the login screen. So what we're going to do is go to the bottom of this file, create a Firebase user, and we're going to keep track of it using provider.authContext. This is short for provider.authContext, and we're going to constantly listen to any changes in the user's value. So we have our stream provider created. Any value of user changes, our Firebase user will get to know, and auth wrapper will change. I mean, it will rebuild the build function, and the widget will get rebuilt. So here we are going to have an if condition saying if the Firebase user is not equal to null. That means that the user has logged in or the user has signed up. That means that the user has some value. So if it has some value, it's not going to be null. Then we are going to return a home screen that we are going to create. Else we are going to return the login screen, which is the button screen. Now what we're going to do is in the screens create a home screen.dart file. And in this home screen.dart file, what we're going to do is import material package first, then create a stateless widget where we're going to have a scaffold with a body. In the center, we're going to have a text that says logged in. Alright, now we can go back to our main.dart file and import the home screen. After this, we can save and run our app and see what we're getting right now. We should actually be logged in, but let's see what happens. While the app is being loaded, I just wanted to tell you one change that I've made. In the home property, you need to replace home screen with auth wrapper. I had forgotten to do that. Make sure to do this. Alright, so our app has loaded up, and here you can see we are on the main screen. Now that's because I've deleted all the users from the authentication tab. Here what I'm going to do now is click on anonymous sign in, and as you can see we are logged in now. So that means our app is now working. Now a slight change I would like to make. In the login screen, instead of having Firebase auth methods, Firebase auth.instance, I mean this works, but a better thing to do would be to have following line in context.read Firebase auth methods.signin with Google. This will be a very readable and better code, so to say. So now that would be a better thing. So let's import provider package and have this, and let's do this for all the functions that we have. Suppose there's Facebook, so we can have .signin with Facebook. Then for anonymous sign in, so we have sign in anonymously. And from here we can remove Firebase auth package, so that's a good thing. Now we can go to the phone screen, and here we can have something like this passed in. Now you can go to the sign up email and login email finally and have that done. So here I'm going to paste it here. So here we have context.read sign up with email and password, and you can do that with login as well. Now because of this we can remove Firebase auth packages from the file, and this is a very good thing to do. So that's why I've removed all of this. Awesome. Now this will work as expected. You can see if we restart the application, we are still logged in. So it's working well, but it's just a neater and cleaner code to write in my opinion. Now what I'm going to do is close all the save files and go to the home screen. And in here, we're going to display certain stuff. So now before displaying anything in the body, what I'm going to do is go in the Firebase auth methods and here create another getter called user. And this user is going to be the authentication user. So auth.currentUser, and we've used a null check operator here, basically enforcing that it's never going to be null. This is because we are going to use this user when we are already signed in. So we already know that the current user is always going to be non-nullable. That's why we have an exclamation mark here. So after saving this, we can go back to our home screen. So what we need to do is in the home screen, first of all, access the user. So we are going to do context.read Firebase auth methods.user, and we are using read, not watch, because this user's value won't change automatically with the help of stream. I mean, you can do watch, it won't be a big issue, but a read would be a better thing to do in my opinion, just for displaying stuff. Then in the body, we're going to have column because we're going to display several things. The first thing we need to display is first of all the user email. So here we need to check if the user is not anonymous and if the user's phone number is null, because we know that if the user is anonymous, then they don't have an email, and if the phone number is null, then they have an email. So we are going to display text user.email. Now if I save this much and go to the application, you can see nothing shows up because we are anonymously signed in. Now the next thing we want to display is again checking if the user is not anonymous and user phone number is null, then we need to show the provider ID that they've used to log in. And here again we are not getting anything because we are not using any provider ID, google.com, facebook.com, nothing. After that, we need to check if the user's phone number is not null, then we need to display the user phone number. And again, if we save, we see nothing because as we expected, user is anonymously signed in. After that, we need to display the user ID, and we will see that because user ID is given to every user. So if we save this, you can see user ID showing up. After this, we are going to check if the user's email is not verified, and if the user is not anonymous, then we'll give them a button to verify their email. So we have a custom button saying verify email, and now we should not be able to see it, and we are not seeing it because the user is anonymously signed in. And the last button we have is actually not the last, but the second last button is the sign out button. So now let's create a sign out function for our app. So if we scroll down to the bottom, so for sign out, so here we are going to create a sign out function which is not going to return anything and is going to be asynchronous. After that, we are going to have a try catch block, and in that try block, we're going to basically do auth.signout and we'll automatically sign out. Now, if I save this much in the application, we are seeing a sign out button. If I click over here, we come back to this login screen, and if I refresh the application, you can see we are still on the login screen. That means we have logged out successfully. Now what I'm going to do is use Google sign in, and I'm logged in successfully, and you can see position emailer @gmail.com, the provider ID which is google.com, and the user ID, all of them showing up. And if I go to my tab and reload, you can see an anonymous account and a position emailer.com. After this, let's create a delete button. So with this, we will be able to remove this account instead of manually going here and deleting the account. The user will be able to click on the sign out button and their account will get deleted. So now let's go to the Firebase auth methods again. And in here, we are going to create a delete account button. This delete account button is again going to be delete account with nothing to return and an asynchronous function. It's going to have a try catch block, and over here basically what we're going to do is await it auth.current user. So we're going to access the current user, using which we have accessed multiple properties like email, provider ID, UID, and we're going to call the delete function on it. With this, the current user will get deleted. And now if I save this much, I get the option of deleting the account. So if I click on delete account, you can see we get signed out, and if we reload, the account is deleted as well. So we have done everything. Now if you want to check for phone number, you can just phone sign in and see it by yourself. This is where I'm going to stop. So this was a tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video.